But ultimately, it's, I think, more of a question of how does culture shape the parts of ourselves, not whether if or if it does, right?
So, welcome to the Mindfulness Within Podcast, a space where healing isn't about fixing, but about remembering what has always been whole. This is a podcast for therapists and those wanting to learn more about internal family systems, also known as IFS. I'm your host, Gilbert Romero-Mewharter. Today marks a special shift in our journey together. For the first time on this podcast, I'm joined by a guest. Someone whose presence, perspective, mentorship, and work deeply resonate with the heart of this space. In past episodes, we've explored internal family systems, or IFS, meeting the protectors, those parts of us that strive to manage pain, and the exiles, the tender ones. They work to shield. Our inner systems are not shaped in isolation. They are formed within culture, history, and relationship. That's why today's episode opens a new conversation. How do our identities, our culture, race, gender, language, queerness show up as parts within us? And how can mindfulness help us witness them with care and curiosity rather than judgment? To help us explore this, I'm honored to be joined by Martha Stebbins-Aguiñiga, a bilingual, bicultural therapist, EMDR-certified therapist, and social justice advocate whose work bridges trauma healing, cultural identity, and community care. Together, we'll explore how IFS invites us to understand identity, not just as something we have, but as something we experience through voices, protectors, and stories we carry. Take a breath, and let's begin. Martha, it's such a pleasure to have you here with us. And I think if you could just kind of kick us off and talk to us a little bit about how you see culture and our multiple identities, how all those connect.
Thank you so much, my dear friend, for this invitation and for the honor of being here with you and joining you and your listeners on this journey to understand more about all the parts that make up who we are and how we are in the world. It is such an interesting question you have for us today related to culture and parts of self and uh, all the ways in which this also shows up or maybe doesn't in self energy. One of the thoughts that I think you and I were talking about was the way in which all of the different ways that we take in information from our families, from the practices, the cultural rituals that we are, get stored within us and form some of the identities that we lead with. But also, they become a part of some of the ones that are either invisible to the outside world or that we decide for one reason or another to keep inside of us. Sometimes this can be because society or culture itself might decide that these identities or parts must stay hidden, that they're not accepted, that they must be marginalized. Other times, for whatever reason or whatever information there might be, we might feel as though we should be ashamed of these parts, or they're simply not to be shared. Right? There's so much that can go into this. Also, there can be a lot of joy and pride and a lot of community building when we can assemble and form different parts of ourselves that can be more outward facing and can help us connect and feel a sense of belonging, right? There's a lot of complexity here. But ultimately, it's, I think, more of a question of how does culture shape the parts of ourselves, not whether if or if it does, right? Uh, I don't know how that resonates with your expertise in IFS. You certainly are much better versed in IFS than I am.
Thank you, Martha. Now, as you were talking, I was just thinking about how even we may have similar identities, how those are different for each person. And so one of the things I was thinking about was my cultural piece is Mexican American, right? And that's shaped by my parents and their experience. So how this can actually be a legacy, right? So part of their parts that were formed by how Mexican Americans were perceived at the time of their upbringing. And the was you can't talk Spanish. To be Spanish is left. Right? So then they were beat for that. So success for them meant you can't speak the language. So that was lost in my generation. And so now there is kind of a little bit of shame in that, right? When I interact with other people of the same culture, and that can really take a toll over time about not being connected. So I think sometimes that comes up in not being wanting to be seen in those spaces, right? To kind of hide in the back. Because we don't want to confront that. We don't want to feel that shame anymore. So I was wondering for you, Martha, like, how does that show up broadly kind of in the clients that show up with you?
Absolutely, absolutely. Such a wonderful question again, and wonderful context to also bring into some of the answers to this question, because I think you're already saying something about how all parts of ourselves inform what we do or what we don't do, how we show up, whether those parts are accessible or not, they are informing a lot of what we bring into relationships and bring into our lives. Further, a lot of the time, what we are seeing in the therapeutic space is protector parts, however they are showing up, right? But they're also doing their job, which they know how to do very well, to shield some of the vulnerability behind, right? Some of the wounds, some of the reasons why other parts of ourselves might be hidden or ashamed. So all of this is showing up in the therapy room. And part of the work, as you well know, is to acknowledge, respect, dignify the part that is present, and also know that there may be others that are holding hands, so to speak, with the part that is before us, and also all the ones that may be aligned in different ways, whether it be behind this protector, kind of to the side, peeking through, right? Giving room and space and voice for also any of the parts that consent to talk with us and talk with the person that is honoring us with their presence in the therapy room. Another thing you're making me think about is how doing parts work is all about consent. We can only move forward when a part of us decides to show up in whatever way they show up, and they are to be accepted and acknowledged as such, right? But sometimes there will be some parts that don't consent to directly speak with us or communicate about what they're holding, and that's totally okay, right? Part of our work is also to acknowledge that, accept that no, right? Not right now, and give room for that.
You said that so beautifully and eloquently. I was really honed in on the words that you used about consent. And like, there are no bad parts. These parts are really working hard in different ways. So, like you said, part of it is to protect us, right? To protect us from that shame. I think the other part sometimes that we forget about, it's also to manage, right? Like, so we're in our professional setting. So thinking about like, how can I let this part show up and like honor parts that are coming up there saying, you can't, you shouldn't speak up here in this space. And you shouldn't do this and you shouldn't do that. And I'm wondering, Martha, like, what are some ways that you see to work with those parts that kind of produce some of this shame and have them ease?
Well, I'll share a few thoughts. I'd be curious to hear what you've encountered in your work as well. My first thought as you were asking that question was to talk about befriending the part. But even before we can befriend any part, we must ask for consent, right? And even if there is no consent, right, just the acknowledgement that asking for space, asking for room, asking for whether or not this part is ready to engage in the work in the way that we're asking to engage, right, is an acknowledgement, an expression of gratitude, and an upholding of its dignity. Ultimately, as you said, Gil, there are no bad parts, and every part that forms us is there to protect us, to ensure our survival and find opportunities for thriving. And what we know, or I think I've encountered, I'm sure you have as well, is that when we don't proceed in that way with parts, when there is an indication that there's a blaming or shaming of a part, there will be no access, right? Of course, that is what it responds to, that is what it's protecting us against. There will be no steps towards even befriending, right? Which is often the first thing we go into once there is consent. The befriending part, I think, might be something relatable to any one of us and to any of your listeners in terms of forming relationship, getting to know anyone, anything, or any part for that matter requires that we present ourselves with openness, with acceptance, with curiosity, right? All we're there to do is explore and discover and in some ways show our respect and admiration for all the wonderful pieces of information that this part has managed to assemble into, this wonderful way of being and showing up and ultimately protecting ourselves and our self energy, right? So, the next part to my answer to your question is kind of connected to the beginning, which is the how to befriend, right? It's also possible that in the befriending process, if we don't show up with curiosity, with openness, that the part itself might also begin to respond to our own parts as therapists, which, let's be real, they are there. We are human and we have them too. Um, but they might not feel safe. They might not feel like we are indeed creating the space where they can begin to share and build relationship with us, and they might retreat. And that's also okay, and it is their right, and that consent can be removed at any time.
As you were saying that, I was actually thinking about the protocol. And you know, second step is just about talking about how you feel towards this part, right? And so a lot of times we may get like angry and it's be like, wait a minute, is that really you talking, or is this other part that's like, I'm sick of him acting this way. I want him out of here because like he's causing so much chaos in my life. Like I just want that part out, right? So really showing up to therapy and accepting like, hey, there are gonna be other parts that do not want to let this other part out. So thinking about our protectors, right? And they're like, nope, no, you want to talk to this exiled part, but he's been causing so much chaos at work, at home, in our relationships. Like, no. So really thinking about, oh, are there, co-collaborators in internal family systems and getting consent even from those that surround that exiled part. And then I think talking about befriending, sometimes it's about being seen. We think about that moment, maybe at work, even in our professional scene, when maybe we're, well, I'd say called out, but asked to contribute because someone knows us and says, we're missing an important perspective here. What is it? And how good that feels when someone else knows who we are. And that befriending part is just so important for them to be seen.
Yeah, yeah. I so appreciate you bringing that forth, Gil, because it also brings to my mind how, among many other things you and I have in common, is a love and passion for infant and early childhood mental health. And I think one of the many connections that that work can have to internal family systems is that oftentimes, I think what I've found out, I'm curious if you've experienced something similar, is that protectors are often stepping in because the parts of us that hold a lot of vulnerability are often very young and often carry wounds from very early on in our lives. Even if we think about something like a legacy burden, something that's been passed on to us from previous generations, even some of those burdens might come from a place of being very young. So young that they might feel defenseless, helpless, unprotected, and sometimes right in those moments when those wounds were generated, there was a need to be seen, to be heard in whatever way we were communicating, but that was not captured in that need for safety and security. It was not received. And fast forward many decades, sometimes many generations, right? Those very early wounds are still living within. So I think your comments just make me think about the sensitivity that this work requires, and the authenticity and the genuine presence that we must bring to it, right? There is no tricking a protector when it comes to their role is keeping these very young and vulnerable parts safe, right?
Ah, yes. I think you bring up something very important. Like, we don't want to trick our protectors. We want to talk to them and find out why are they gatekeeping part, right? So what why is it that they're gatekeeping? And yeah, that I think almost giving them permission, right? Like to not leave, but just step aside. And again, we're not trying to get rid of them. They've served an important function for a really long time, or and to honor that work. And then I was also thinking about those young parts. So in IFS, we might say that they're frozen in those times. I have a couple of clients we talk about, is this your self energy talking, or is this that frozen 15-year-old boy, woman who, at the time, that horrible thing happened to you? And the way to protect yourself was overeating, controlling your food portions. And that with you this whole time. And we honor that part because it kept you safe and it got you to where you are today. And now we're saying that you don't have to do that anymore. And I think after being seen, right, that part says, that's great. Now what? What do I do? So offering him, like, what else would you like to do? What would be your dream job? Uh, is it that corner office or is it like, I want to go on vacation to the beach?
I love that. I love that. Absolutely. And I think you're bringing my mind certainly back to the connection at this point in the conversation back to culture, because culture itself has a lot of messaging and a lot of values and beliefs embedded about what age might mean, what gender might mean, what sexuality might mean. And I say this also with the caution that sometimes culture is not necessarily the behavior or the practice we see on the surface, right? I think, for example, we certainly won't get to dissect this in depth today in our brief conversation, but even if we think about the Latina culture, Latinx culture, a lot of what we might on the surface call culture has a lot of colonialism on top of it, right? Our indigenous communities certainly were not sexist, were not transphobic or homophobic. They had very inclusive practices for belonging, regardless of identity or gender in particular. There was a lot of wisdom and power attributed to the elderly as well as the young, right? And when we think about um, what we might at times confuse, right, between like oppressive practices and culture around ageism or adultism or things like these, right? We're talking about colonialism. We're not necessarily talking about culture, right? um, in some ways connected and also separate. As you were talking, Gil, I was thinking about sometimes to navigate a little bit of the IFS work um, as linked to cultural identity. Sometimes I might reference the movie Encanto, for example, which shows various archetypes of cultural behavior and also the value underneath it. Right? We see someone who may be very nurturing through food, which is a very common way of showing care and gratitude and love and even healing, right? Through a cultural lens. We might also see a lot that might be behind that, right? But it often provides um, an accessible way to imagine how all parts ultimately live in a home that must be protected and preserved, and that the community itself can help sustain and rebuild when there are cracks, right? I think ultimately, also, when we talk about IFS, we're talking about a particular name that we attribute to this practice and this technique in this moment, but one that has preceded the current iteration, right? One that actually has emerged from a collection of indigenous and community centered practices that are ancestral.
Ah, y- thank you for bringing us back to that culture piece that we started off with. As you were talking, I was actually thinking of the movie Coco, my own connection with my grandmother. And two, like, there is, right, like this strong feeling of having to be isolated in order to be protected from a family. And yet, through learning more, right, that exiled part was able to be freed in the end and celebrated. And so I think that's kind of like the next step, right, in the IFS process is really understanding the part's story, their function, their fears, and really thinking together about like how much of this was formed before you, how much are you carrying, and then what are the beautiful parts of this we want to take forward, and what are the parts that can rest now because they're no longer needing, but they can stay behind and be on the beach, right? Or or be with our ancestors. I was thinking about how even our language is gendered, right? And what you said earlier about how it's been colonized, that like actually no, it hasn't always been this way. So even challenging that story a little bit and showing like it can be so much more beautiful and inclusive.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I think your comment about allowing an opportunity for rest for some of our parts is is so powerful. And I think over the course of the time that I've been more familiar with IFS and have begun to offer it to people who've been interested in it, that possibility, Gil, has brought so much relief and so many openings. Whether the part rests or doesn't, right, is kind of beside the point, or how it might rest or when it rests is beside the point. Simply the naming of the possibility is a huge source of relief. Right? Sometimes part of the story that our parts carry is that there is no other way, that there is no other possibility. And I think that's a really important role of the healer, in this case, the therapist, the IFS therapist, is to name the possibilities, right? And also to perhaps demystify that to the parts who might carry also the story of I'm going to be evicted. Right? If if I am found to no longer serve a purpose, I am gonna be kicked out, right? But to also name the possibility that yes, perhaps this is an opportunity for this part to make room, and also it will always have a home within. Oh, you can see sometimes that breath, right? You can see that release of there doesn't have to be an either or. There can be a way in which all of us can find a way to coexist in this moment.
Yeah, which you named it really well. In IFS, we call that being the hope merchant, right? Like, would this part be interested in doing this job a different way? That it doesn't have to continue to work so hard. And yes, when you see the whole body relax around this, it's pure magic because I think what happens a lot in therapy, and Martha, please jump in, is that we do the intake. It's very like, share your deepest, darkest secrets with me in the hour. You don't know me. You don't know what I do with this information. And then we're going to tell you exactly what to do to get rid of this feeling, right? And so in IFS, to say, like, we're actually not fixing you. We are here to think about, like, what can we do differently? We're not, this is a part of you that was formed in order to protect you. And unfortunately, the skills you had at the time, they were just shooting for anything that stopped that pain and that hurt. And now what we're saying is, can you come back and then come forward with me into the present, into the now, and see what we've accomplished and see that there is this different way?
Yes, absolutely, Gil. I think you're reminding me a little bit of the context in which IFS came into my life, which was in partnership with EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, which is a very effective technique to address a lot of different things, in particular post traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, depression, a variety of things. And one of the many ways in which IFS pairs so well with EMDR is that it resources you, right? It fills your basket with possibilities, so that when you arrive at a very crucial point in EMDR, which is when you get to decide what do you want to believe instead. So yes, this happened, but what's ahead for you? Right? So what's next? You can have both what you went through and also what you desire for the future. Right? You're going to have a full basket. Thanks to techniques like IFS, you can say, well, I have all these possibilities. I have all these options. Yes, this thing or this other thing did happen, and that I will hold that while also choosing this, right, to take forward.
Hmm. Martha, that is just so beautiful. And I was thinking about what you were talking about, our kind of native ways of healing. And I'm thinking about our curanderas and the medicine man, and how really that's what a lot of them were thinking of, was like, that was your past. How are we going to create the future? Well, wow. still carrying our ancestors with us, right? And build on those hopes and dreams they had for us. And what are the hopes and dreams we want for others as we move forward in our life? And, ah, yeah, I always wish we had more time, but I know we don't. What are some things that you maybe wanna let therapists know or people who are maybe recovering and healing from maybe these cultural exiles?
Oh, you ask a question that is really meaningful to me because I think one of the main focuses of this phase of my life is to think about the healing of the healer. And it may be repeating something that all or most therapists and healers out there have heard, but it is true that you matter and you do exist in the context of your life in the therapeutic space. Speaking of culture, as we have been today, there has been a culture in which the healer or the therapist has been erased, dehumanized. It's come to reflect a variety of things that ultimately don't hold the interaction or the relationship that we build in the moment. And to bring it back to IFS again, I think it does provide a lot of room to consider and hold and also heal a lot of the parts of ourselves that come up in this work, right? And a lot of the work that we do behind the scenes to make sure that those parts are attended to, that they feel at home within us so that then we can listen to the parts of others as they show up with us and seek healing and seek to be heard and seen. So I think this question you bring gives me an opportunity to say, let's find abundance, right? Let's find the space in which all of us can coexist and have the ability to reflect on how it is that we are intersecting in this world, right? How it is that we are making something together beyond whatever paradigms or theories we've been offered in therapy school. Um, for those, all of us out there who are healing, and if certainly if you are living in a human body, we're all healing something all of the time. I think one of my takeaways from this conversation with you, Gil, is um, the opportunity to hold awareness of the cultural pull to be in an either or space. Right? Perhaps this goes into a different conversation about culture, but a lot of us identify the either or thinking as part of white supremacy culture. Right? It is designed to take away power from a lot of us, people living in bodies of color in particular, and holding a lot of different gender and sexual identities. And being able to demystify that, take away that narrative, and bring forth one of abundance, one of intersection, one of collaboration is something that IFS promotes and something that may feel small, but that will invite healing in the micro moments of the everyday.
Wow. Ah, I am so honored to know you. Thank you for that beautiful collection of just thoughts. And yeah, I really think with IFS, it gives practitioners a way to be like, whoa, I really connected with my client in that seat right now. Like, instead of running to like, ooh, countertransference, right? I think it just allows us to name like, I'm human. Wow. I can't think about how I would have reacted being put in that same situation because that pain that that person is carrying in this moment is a lot. And I, as a clinician, it's weighing on me right now. but it doesn't mean I have to let it sit with me. I can ask that to step aside so I can be present and here with who's in my seat. And then I think for the client too, uh, sometimes I'll just say, like, there's a part of me that really wants to protect you right now and not go down that hole with you. And there is me who knows it's the right thing to do at this moment. So, let's just both take a breath and know that this journey is going to be hard right now, but we're both going to be okay. And if you're not okay, I can hold that for you and you can give that to me. And then we can invite our protectors back at the end and let them know they can take over, but we're not getting rid of anyone.
Beautiful. So beautiful. And I am honored to know you and consider you a friend and a colleague. Thank you for the opportunity to be in conversation with you today and always. And thank you as well for making me feel so at ease and making them feel like we are co-creating something together.
Definitely. Thank you. One of the things we do on this podcast is just provide some exercises based on the content. I wonder if you would just honor me and lead one of those exercises today.
Let's begin by taking a moment to connect with a part of us that holds our cultural identity. To do this, we'll invite you to just follow your breath and notice it as it follows the natural rhythm that it's following in this moment. There's nothing to change about it. Feel as a part of yourself that holds your cultural identity comes forth. There may be several, some perhaps connected to family heritage, language, traditions, even parts shaped by how others have treated you because of your background. Whichever part of you decides to come forth, allow it to come into awareness as you take a few slow, mindful breaths. Notice this part coming forth, and on the in-breath, allow for your body to fill with a sense of peace while you release judgment and harshness on the out-breath. Now, holding this part of you in awareness, holding any cultural information that's relevant to you in this moment, you don't need to force anything, but see if it offers you a memory, an image, perhaps a feeling. Maybe it's something that brings you a sense of pride. It could also be a part of you that feels pressure or shame. Anything that comes up is welcome. All parts are welcome. I'll invite you in this moment to offer a few questions to this part. How do you feel about carrying this cultural story? What would you like me to know about your experience? How have you tried to protect me or connect me to belonging? Stay curious. Breathe. Offer appreciation to this part for carrying something so complex and often unspoken. Let it know you're listening now and that it's not alone. In whatever way feels right to you, send this part light in gratitude for communicating with you today.
Martha, thank you for leading us through that once again. And I just want to encourage those that are listening to please like, subscribe, share with anyone else that might benefit from this helpful exercise. I'm just going to do one more exercise and then I'll close this out. If you just won't mind staying with us for this last little bit. So in this next exercise, we'll explore how parts of us can carry internalized voices, messages from culture, society, or family that may not actually belong to us. Take a breath and allow yourself to settle in the moment. Now gently ask inside, is there a part of me that holds a voice that doesn't feel fully mine? Maybe it says, I have to be strong all the time. Or, I don't deserve to take up this space. Or, my needs are not as important. Let that part show itself. You might notice where it lives in your body or how it speaks to you. Ask this part, where did you first learn this message? Whose voice is this really? What are you afraid would happen if you let go of that belief? With mindful awareness, let this part know it does not have to carry that message alone anymore. You, the self, are here now. You can hold it with compassion, and together you can choose what to carry forward and what to gently release. If you like this exercise and the content, please go ahead, press like and subscribe. As we close today's episode, take a moment to notice how you feel. You've just spent time listening inward to your parts, your culture stories, and yourself. That's a powerful act of care. We often move through the world carrying messages and rules shaped by our history, our culture, and our identities. Today, we honored those inner voices, not to judge or fix them, but to understand them with compassion. Internal family systems reminds us every part of us has a reason for being, and mindfulness helps us meet them with presence without rushing them away. Remember, your culture is not something outside of you. It lives inside too, as parts that carry meaning, memory, and sometimes pain. These parts deserve just as much kindness and curiosity as any other. And yourself, the calm, grounded center within you, is always available to lead the way. Thank you for showing up for yourself today. And thank you, Martha, for joining us in this new format. We're so grateful to share this space of connection and healing with you. If this episode resonated with you, consider sharing it with someone who may also be exploring their identity and inner world. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes as we continue to explore the intersection of mindfulness, IFS, and the fullness of who we are. Till next time, take care of your parts, stay rooted in yourself, and remember, you are whole, you are enough, you are never alone. If you'd like to connect with Martha, please, please, please go down in the comment section, find her contact information, and you can find out more about EMDR. She is also a very gifted supervisor for licensed mental health consultants, as well as an amazing trainer. If you want or need any more information, please contact her at Menta Counseling, of which she is the proud owner.